Hello and welcome to Viewfinders, where I interview amazing photographers and talented people and visionaries. And today we have a special guest. We have Maury Postal, who is someone I've worked with many times, creative director, photographer, brilliant person. And we're going to get some amazing insights into inspiration and collaboration and photography and everything. So welcome, Maury.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Good, good. Yeah, you are not a photographer by trade. I mean, it's a part of your work, but you're not like a photographer. But you are one of the best photographers that I know. And when I was collecting inspiration for this, I was just, I mean, it just is like staggering, and you go back to your photos from, like 8 years ago and stuff, and it's just like, it's so just creative and fun. Like you have fun with the camera. It's just
I,
like it's so freeing to look at the way that you see the world and capture the world and show it, and you just it's great. So hopefully we'll share. Hopefully people will get that from the examples we show.
Thank you. I like to say I'm a happenstance photographer because it's the easiest way to capture what's in my head, or it's easy to if I'm stopping on the street to look at something, I can show that it's for a reason and not just, having a moment.
That's good. I should try that. Um, so so what what is your role? What is your path to where you are now, and what are you looking to do going forward?
I think that's a very good way of putting it. As of right now, I am at Ketchum, which is a communications consultancy where I help guide creative teams to create a variety of things. But the path has been a very long and winding one. Prior to this, I was at Hearst, where I ran the blend line with a great friend of mine, Craig Deitch. And we were kind of like the resident automotive nerds inside of the amazing automotive machine that was Car and Driver and Road and Track, and we got to just go really deep and do really cool and weird things like collaborate with wonderful people like yourself on things that were like, honestly, those projects where if you could just sit and think of what's the coolest thing you'd ever want to do, like that's what we did. And it was honestly the best thing, where I would surround myself with different art books and different things that inspired me and say, how can we apply that to the automotive world? How can we take the feeling of driving, the feeling of speed, the feeling of freedom, and have that come through the world of different automotive brands and models and things that related to the auto world? But before that, I was at Ogilvy and Mather, where I was embedded into the Ford and Lincoln universes forever ago. And that's where I know we got to do some amazing things that honestly, like, I still pinch myself that that was reality. Just going
Yeah,
to Michigan all the time, and we would do things that were, I think, at the peak of when the automotive world had a reveal every other day that was treated with like the utmost secrecy and the utmost importance, and working on like iconic nameplates and things. That was amazing.
yeah,
Um,
and big reveals and flashy events and things like that.
oh yeah, I mean,
Launches.
I'm waiting for that Netflix show because the cast of characters and the things that you would experience, it's like it doesn't seem real that it actually happened, especially now, like in work from home. I almost feel like it's like someone saying, okay, Grandpa, that used to happen. You actually used to leave the house and do cool things. But I know I have these artifacts that I've had from my different journeys, like the lamp from Hearst that's behind me. I know that it's real because of that. But
They're gonna want
the
that back. They're gonna see this and want that back.
probably, but the cool thing is, um, there's a really cool idea that starts with, you identify self-identify as a creative person, and that doesn't mean much. You have to figure out kind of what your tangible outputs are. And I think the coolest thing has been trying to figure out what maybe can I do that I haven't thought of yet. So like photography is like one thing that I like to still dabble in, depending on if it's with a phone or with an actual camera. But there's also like so many other worlds that I like to kind of play in. And where the automotive world kind of intersects all of that is that, to me, cars are sculptures. They've always been. The
Yeah,
thing I miss most living in a city is that I like staring at cars in parking lots, which sounds insane, but the thing I learned most from those Ford days, in the Lincoln days, was like being in the design studio, and that was like I mean, I can't even tell you, that was like a dream upon a dream, but to be
Yeah.
there and be with the car designers and seeing it's not just a single title, right? You have people that do so many different things, from exterior to lighting to interior things and switch gear. And but for me, it's always still, the sheet metal, the sculpture that you're creating. It's just so magical to see that come
Yeah,
to life, and to kind of
for
like
sure.
really just go so granular to understand why a panel is the way that it is, and to have that in the context of like a different lighting condition. I mean, it still gets me excited to think about it, even though the only person I'm entertaining is myself, just kind of staring at my car. But
And to see
it,
stuff in
it
the process, like along the way, like before the reveal, along, and to be in the loop. I mean, that's like what we all dream of as kids that are car obsessed kids, is like to see the concept car before anyone else does, and then see it come to life, and then touch it and be around it and everything.
and the excitement. I mean, like everyone loves it. I mean, because it's a tangible thing, and I
Yeah,
think that process also is collaborative, and it's not linear. Like you might get to a certain place in that design process and realize this isn't working. You have to start over, and that's maybe when the best idea happens. And that does apply to the creative process for anything. And I think that is just so exciting, because anyone who kind of takes their creativity and applies it to a specific field understands all the inputs that you have to come into. And I remember, on Lincoln, I would talk to the design team there about what inspires them. I remember we're going through some like mood boarding session, and I'm thinking it's crazy that they're designing this car using the same imagery that I was using to describe how I wanted a campaign to feel, and that a car design can be influenced by a painting. And I think
yeah.
some of the best art in the world is actually in Detroit at the DIA, the Detroit Institute of Art. And they have this collection of uh, expressionist paintings that just, it's what?
This is terrible. But it reminds me of in Team America, when it's like this guy is the finest martial artist Detroit has to offer.
That's how I feel most of the time in Detroit. It's like you have to know a person of a person of a person. But it's like,
uh,
I feel like it's so visceral when you see some of this art, and you see some like, even when we were just preparing and I was going through my phone, there was a time for the movie that I was making when I was at Hearst, and we went and interviewed Ed Welburn, and we went to his design studio that was an old firehouse, and I found a
oh,
picture of
cool.
this like 54 Corvette. I want to say 54. But like the red seats, I remember we were talking about the colors that show up really well on this phone now. But it was really interesting. The way that it was lit for an interview lit some of the cars in his office in a way that wasn't normally that way. So this picture that I took was like me
Like
just
real
doing this.
cars, like full scale cars, or like
Oh yeah, like
okay,
it was his collection just behind him,
okay,
like we had positioned it. And I remember just taking all these snapshots that now are those moments in between, but clearly meant a lot to me, that I don't even remember taking. And that was, 3 or 4 years ago. And to me, that's like the best of the creative process. You might be in a place to do one thing, but like when we work on stuff, it's amazing, because like we'll be there to do one thing, and then I'll have an idea, or I'll see something that might relate to another thing years down the road.
yeah,
And I kind of love that part of just having that creative mind that, as we know, can like kind of circle around and kind of get to a place where it's very circuitous, but you'll end up in a place eventually that feels good. That's like my career path, where now I do more mentoring and more leading versus doing. And that's always been my favorite part, is that collaboration, where you're trying to bring different things that might seem really disparate together,
mhm,
and it just kind of works, or maybe it doesn't. And we were
yeah,
just talking about like the best things that happen like are they're best when they don't work, because then you have to figure out a solution. And
yeah, and you get
that's like,
something maybe better than what you originally hoped, or something different.
absolutely. I mean, especially when you think about, the day in the life of a creative person. Like, you'll set out, I have to do X, Y, and Z things, right? I have to make a logo for something. And then while you're doing it, you might come across a color that you're like, this doesn't work for that, but wow, I'll save that. And then it just comes up when you're not expecting it, like you're in line ordering a torchy's taco, and you're like, eh?
Yeah. Well, so when you were at Lincoln, let's talk about some of this work. I've got your website up here. Um, you were this is your new website, which I want you to check out. It's linked. It's very very good. But
Thank you.
you would bring in artists and bring them into projects and have them interpret things. So there's some of my stuff here, so which is honored to be on your site, and then some of your own shots behind the scenes. And this project with the Continental was really exciting to work on. And I'm just scrolling through this too fast, but it was like such a fun day doing this. And the photos, like, these are so great. Like, I just love that it's a mix of, well, your photos and a couple of mine, and it's just but yeah, it was like
Well,
it was a exciting day, and a great process, and a lot of fun.
well, thank you. I would say the pleasure was mine, because if you recall, we didn't have studio lighting experience, and we were given a studio to just figure it out. And that's like my
Yeah,
favorite thing to do is,
yeah. Oh no, I mean, absolutely. Like, I've shot in a studio where there was like a tech guy, and he like lights it, and it's like it's so prescriptive and kind of boring, and not. I mean, there's a time and place for that, and it's like you want to show the car. It's like, okay, well, this is the best way to light it, but I still like the mystery, and this is just full of mystery and beauty, and like, it's something that is it's an object that is so surreal, but like you're seeing it in this world that is oddly real,
it
because you see kind of the behind the
completely.
scenes.
It's in your head. Like, I mean, as you're scrolling through this too, I remember you would see things that you had to capture that might not be the entire frame, but you wanted to guide the viewer to that place. And like with this one, for instance, it was like those door handles that are now on the
Yeah.
Mach-E, which it's
Oh, are
crazy
they?
when oh yeah, that's the same tech. Because I remember
Okay.
the
Yeah.
the discussion about how it came from racing, and then they applied it to the concept, which went to the production model. Which, now that the Continental is no longer in production, the door handles are with the Mach-E.
Okay. Okay. That is cool. So you brought in all these artists and collaborators, and what, like, when you work with photographers, first of all, what goes into like hiring people, bringing people on? Like, what are you looking for in uh, talent for something like
It's
that?
it's crazy, because years ago it was that social media was about discovering people that you had a similar kind of eye with, or had a completely different perspective, that you saw they saw something that you wanted to kind of be a part of. And at the time, it was who captures the world in a way that's really unique, and
Right.
how can their perspective apply to what Lincoln's trying to do. So it wasn't take a picture this way. It's more, we're going to describe what this is to us. What does that mean to you? And it was weird, because that was a great moment in time where the people that were influential because of their talent, because
Yeah.
it was the outlet that they had to produce what they felt was their best version of themselves. So with Lincoln at the time, I had like the longest rope ever to kind of bring in as many people to the fold that weren't automotive centric. And what was really great is that it was a time that I think being weird was still on the like outside of the sort of popular idea of what was quote unquote social media worthy, or what was like worthy, what was going to actually drive engagement. Because at the time, remember, there was still organic engagement, it wasn't just all paid. So you wanted people that both had a really active following, but had a following because of the work that they did. But it was more visual people geeking out over very deep visual things, and that was my favorite epoch of my
Hmm.
career, because there was the time and space to do that, even though things were accelerating, right? Like, you produce things on shorter timelines, you were able to be briefed properly, maybe go really deep into the studio to understand why the designers made those choices, if you recall, we had dinners that I organized. Like we would all break bread and just talk.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that doesn't exist in a way that it used to because there wasn't an agenda. There honestly wasn't one. I mean, maybe there was somewhere higher up above my pay grade, but the agenda was really bring people in to truly be brand ambassadors to understand what we're doing and why, and they'll go speak to their audiences in a way that's resonant to them.
Yeah.
And from a visual perspective too, it was like, what what are some like images that we can make that will live longer than the model, that will kind of help build the brand? And I think that was what was really cool with Lincoln is they didn't have an identity at the time.
Yeah.
So
And the
we needed to.
products were kind of in flux. It was like the good stuff's coming. You know what I mean? It was like they didn't really
Yes.
know, their design language was still like finding the footing. They were changing it. They didn't know what was working, but like they were starting to do the types of models that would kind of lead to the success they're having now. You know, that's when they started getting into these crossovers that like caught on with people. So it was like, yeah, exactly. It was, how do we paint a picture? How do we create the visual language of this brand, you know, outside of just the
Yes.
cars? And that like,
And
and you were the right person for that. Absolutely.
apparently it was like if Infinity Rocks and Trees happened in 2021, it would have been spectacular because that was always the joke. You never wanted to be Infinity Rocks and Trees. You had to show the car. And the joke now is like, you know, at the LA Auto Show, I'm sure there's 500 booths for electric cars that are vaporware,
Mm,
and they need the vapor. That's what apparently sells is the vapor versus the product. But
yeah.
it's, I think, really important to go back to Rocks and Trees because that idea that was created then was it was an atmosphere, like atmospheric design that kind of created a mood that now, because of technology, you can apply on any platform. But with automotive, it's so weird because like driving to me represented a moment in time, like when I had both the freedom and mind space to enjoy driving, like the canyons in Southern California. Now
Sure.
driving is very purposeful, and I'm
Because
back
you,
to
you
like
live in Brooklyn. You live in Brooklyn, so you drive when you need to.
when I need to, and then I'm the nutty person who's like with their bag of cleaning products, like obsessively cleaning a thing that's impossible to keep clean. But
We could do a
it's
whole nother hour on your neuroses with your parking garage and the people that you deal with.
and the amount of microfiber towels I have, and how I have a system for washing them so they don't dirty my clothes.
Wonderful.
But
That's amazing.
it, I think that the thing with driving to me though, and even the auto industry that's so wonderful is at the end of the day, like cars represent so many things about who we are as a society, like a global society, and how the different manufacturers that represent different cultures really do or should reflect those cultures. The way that the driving experiences, the design elements. But the thing that I miss the most is like you're able to kind of take a product, dissect it, and figure out what it means to you, and give it context, which I
Yeah.
love. And the thing that was so wonderful about that time period was few brands were doing things that felt personal. A lot of things
Right.
felt very commercial, which was weird because the whole reason I think maybe you and I have the idea of the auto industry is because of those commercial things. Like back in Maryland at my parents' house, I still have this Porsche coaster from like 1987 that
Do
I
you have the
see it.
VHSs like Jeff?
Oh, of course. I have the
Oh man.
Pathfinder one from 1996 that had my
Oh,
name on it.
amazing.
Of course.
Okay, so when you're working with these photographers, you're bringing in these creatives. Do you consider it your role to bring out something out of them, or do you just let them like do what they do?
I think the best thing, and I believe this for every brand, is you want to find people that are more talented than yourself and guide them. And you don't want to necessarily cloud their
Right.
vision for things. You want to empower them and give them the tools to kind of be at their best. So for me, I know where I love to bring out context, and maybe one day I'll be a museum docent, is like if I know someone would respond well to the way that a certain artist created things, I try to, make them aware, if not indoctrinate them in the ways of that artist.
Yeah.
And
In
the
Detroit,
idea.
at the
Oh, go ahead.
museum in Detroit.
But even like it can even be in this house. Like we have all these books, and I still it makes me so happy to be surrounded by like knowledge and
Yeah.
by references, because is someone who very much remembers being shamed into citing every type of thing that I've ever done in my life from English class in middle school. I think it's really important to say what you're inspired by, because it helps to create um, basically a visual bibliography of who you are. And
Hmm.
we're all inspired by what came before. Even if we see something in a whole new way, it's typically informed by some of those things that we've experienced. And with uh, photographers, I think what's really great is you have photographers that have to work in a way that is very linear, because that's the audience they're shooting for. And then you have photographers that can be very whimsical and kind of create in a way that might not appeal to everyone, because it really defines who they are. And it's such a risk, right? When you capture an image, when you make an image, and you do it in a way that you'll appreciate it, but will that resonate with a larger audience? And the making of the stuff. I mean, the word maker. I mean, it means something very different. Like, to me, I laugh and I say, well, is someone who has a kid workbench in their parents' garage by making terrible things that fell apart? Yes, I am a maker, but I like to kind of get deeper into that process visually, because like there's two kinds of people in the world, right? There's someone, if you open up a blank page, it's either the scariest thing in the world or the most exciting thing in the world. And I like to think that if you're a photographer, that blank canvas is the most exciting thing, because you start with nothing and you end with
Hmm.
something. And the thing that I find so fascinating as we were preparing for this and going back to like my earlier photos is like the gift or the spark or whatever you want to call it. Like, if you let it kind of flow through you, it's weird what you see. And
Yeah.
when we get caught up in kind of like the monotony of every day, that thing, that spark is what kind of carries you. And I remember in college, I think, when I was like formally trained or started taking design courses, I remember it's like I learned I have this thing that I can bring out, and I'm nervous that if I go back home to my environment that I wasn't allowed to be creative in, that I'll lose it. And I kind of challenged myself to find environments I thought were boring to make them exciting. And then you realize that, well, there's everywhere is exciting. I mean, sitting at this chair, I can be excited by the shadows, the soft shadows on the wall. Like, it's all about choosing to see the things, being open to them. So selecting
Yeah.
artists, I think, are important, where it's like, are they truly artists? Meaning, do they speak that way or do they act that way? And how do they apply these things that they're natural gifts? Like, it's
Yeah.
if if you can see, it's like you're like, the joke I used to make was my cousin. We were on some trip once, and I said, I'm very good at finding light, and she said, I'm very good at finding ice cream. I was like, it's true when you say it that way. It sounds ridiculous, but I mean, it's like a thing. Like, you can point out a composition and you just kind of happen into it. And it's like when you first discover different focal lengths and you find which one suits you. And it's
Yeah.
weird to say that, because it's not like, a pair of pants, but it is in a way,
It sure
because
is.
it's like, for me, I know, I don't know why I don't have this lens, but like the 50, like 1.1, 1.2, that's my
Yeah.
brain. Like,
Yeah.
it just is.
I remember when
And
you took one from the Ogilvy office or something for the weekend, like one of the trips we did.
I
You
used
had
to
it.
rent it
Yeah,
in
you used to rent it.
Sammy's Camera or something in LA, and
Oh,
then
okay.
at Autorama here when I would come here, because the Ogilvy one was a 70 to 200. I remember
Oh, okay.
that was
Okay.
that was like
Because
the
I remember
big
you had
rig.
one. You had something that was like a 1.2 that was crazy.
I would always rent it. It was like there was
Yeah.
a Canon, because this is when we had our famous, Nikon versus Canon debates,
Yeah.
where
There's
it would
still
always
we're
be that
still heated. We're still heated about that.
I'm in the middle ground now, because it's
I
kind
don't
of like
care. Yeah.
when I looked at the pictures I took on my whatever version of the iPhone it was, it's like I miss whatever focal length that was, because that was like the perfect thing to do street photography and hold
Yeah.
it like Vivian Meyer or like
Hmm.
Ouija, like holding a camera like uh, you know you're taking a picture of a birthday party. It's weird. Like, my brain doesn't function that way. It's more like being able to be in weird angles as I get older is very difficult, because
Well, I have to say when we worked uh, when you would bring me, and there'd be six other amazing, brilliant creatives, and these were like the earliest influencers, people who had real talent. They had way bigger followings than me, but they were totally earned. I mean, some of these people in like 2014, it was like I didn't even really see the potential of iPhone photography as a tool for art. And Instagram seemed like throwaway. Like I'll put my behind the scenes here or whatever, but this isn't like the real stuff. And I didn't want to, take DSLR photos and put them on Instagram, which I resisted for a long time. But these were people that shot amazing work for Instagram, and just it was so inspiring to be around people that thought in a different way, and it was really exciting every time, and a real privilege for sure. But before you can say anything, I have to bring up uh, bring up this. This is the past futures Lincoln. I had this up, and I was like, we should talk about this. There's not really a good segue,
I mean,
but
my favorite thing to
this
do is to find someone that I love to collaborate with and drive them insane with like a challenge that might not be solvable, and that's what
was
this was.
this was the first time that we met. Okay, because I think we were like we followed each other on like Flickr and Tumblr and stuff, and we I was still working like a regular day job, and I was still posting a lot. I was doing car stuff and photo stuff on the side, and I talked to like someone from Ogilvy reaches out to me. It wasn't you, and someone it was, I believe it was Brian, and he's like, "Are you interested in coming to Pebble Beach? We have a project in mind." I said, "Yeah, that sounds cool," and and then it was like the third call, or the third, like we finally get to a conference call, and it's like, oh, I see like Mo Postal on the email. I was like, oh, like I know you were so cagey about it. You never reached out to me. And then we met, and then it was like, we're old friends like this. The first time we hung out, and despite the minor car break-in and stuff, other than that, it was fine. Um, so this was a project where, tell us about my work.
I mean, it's weird because like that time was so amazing in the sense that it was like if you actually talk through what we did, it's amazing to me that that was actually possible. Of like there'll be four people, we'll meet in San Francisco. I drove an MKZ from LA to San Francisco. I did like the most arduous of journeys up the five to get this Lincoln to Pebble Beach because we were going to interpret this both vehicle and the things that we saw that year. Because I think Lincoln was the featured mark. And the
Yeah.
thing that always impressed me about Pebble Beach was the landscape is always so beautiful, but you never see photos of the landscape. It's just the greens, or it's
Mhm.
like dawn patrol, right? Like you just see the people gathering. I thought it'd be really interesting if you say this event, which is so memorable for the people who were there, but for the people who aren't, like there's not a lot of context. So how do we create that context around the place and these vehicles that we didn't even know about? Remember the orange Lincoln that keeps popping up
Oh,
at different
yeah, the
points?
Indianapolis
The
concept
Indi-
car. That was so cool. And it wasn't just the Pebble Beach landscape, but it's the whole, I mean, the whole weekend, is the whole week. It's like half a week, and a weekend is like a blur of cars and places. And, I mean, you always go like San Francisco to Monterey, and there's just a million different landscapes. And we captured a lot of that. And
do you know what a weird thing is
was the
like,
double exposures? Was that your idea? Like, I don't
oh
remember. Was
yeah,
it your, okay.
because I was big into that. Like, how do you use things that could kind of be in camera as a tool? Like, how do you rely on the things that you could take at the event as a storytelling device? And the thing to me is like it's almost lyrical. And I remember at the time, like there was a lot of discussion about how you involve music or film. Like, how do we create kind of a multi-sensory experience? And to me, these were very lyrical. Like, I mean, right there, like
Mhm.
the fact that you have these two images that are melded together that have convey movement. And I still think, I mean, the MKZ, I know that front end was there for all of like two model years, but it was beautiful. It was so well done.
It's a
And
wild looking car. Like we talked about this, but we're gonna see it as like the Citroen SM or something of this day, where it's like, how did a major big three car company like make something this weird? You know?
and the design, so Solomon King was a designer. I think he's still there, but he was like, I remember hearing about how he designed the car, and like there's that shoulder, that line that kind of grows over the course of the car.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, right? It should be the Citroen SM of our time, because like a lot of these Lincolns had a lot of motion to them, even when they were standing still. And I remember we were getting really deep into the history of the brand, And I remember like this even, you look at all the jewelry that really made up these very intricate designs and these compound curves and all these beautiful things. And that I think was so important to connect to the natural world because all these forms are very organic. They're not like
Mhm.
now where you have 85 million cut lines to try to make something visually appealing. There was kind of
Right.
more of a flow to it. And I mean, that's not to say there aren't beautiful contemporary cars, but there was just kind of this idea at Pebble Beach, like you don't see how things are connected. Like you're so excited about like one thing that it
Yeah.
might be, like a best in show or it's a very rare car, but there's something really magical about the event itself. And I remember I was really obsessed with reflections, car reflections at the time. And that was like my thing. It was like my joke to myself was in the parking garages in LA, I'd always find like a black colored car to see the reflections of like the other things around it. And
Mhm.
it created like this kind of new vision of space that I thought was incredible. And these, I still don't think you get enough credit for these. I think these are,
Oh, because they were never used for anything ever.
I mean, that's another part of like, I like to say that everyone I involve in a lot of projects, like in 10 years, they're going to get the credit they deserve for the work
You're
because
the Ogilvy Lincoln Skunk Works. You know, not all of it gets seen by the public, but all of it's on the cutting edge.
seriously, I mean, there's a few that are on my portfolio that never saw the light of day that like it breaks my heart because it's so beautiful. And I know that the process is really the joy, and obviously people were compensated for their time, but it's not
Yeah.
about that. It's like the world needs to be a more beautiful place. I mean, honestly, it's like we all the thing that I know I've been more grateful for is like that was such a cool moment in time, and who knows if we'll get
Yeah.
to do that again. And I remember when we were going through it thinking there's no way we're going to pull this off. I'm so exhausted, I'm going to collapse. But when I think about the joy, like how visceral that was, I remember that. And
Yeah.
those are the things that I think every great creative project or every great creative endeavor should have, right? Is that it's it's so it's like a full body experience that
Right.
it makes you want to keep doing it. And the more that I feel like people just see the same things, like Instagram, the algorithm serves them the same thing, or we're kind of rewarded for liking something with more of the same thing. It doesn't take us into a place where we can truly have that like Ferris Bueller moment of like standing back and appreciating something that we might not understand. And
Yeah.
art is the ultimate like voodoo because sometimes you can't explain logically why you came up with something because it's like all these things in your brain that are kind of mashing around until it makes sense. And
Yeah.
with those in particular, I remember you were telling me you did a lot of practice runs with different images and like it clicked. I remember like you sent a batch of 10. I'm like, you did this in like 4 hours. How did you do? It was amazing.
It was funny because I flew back from California and I had 1,000 photos or whatever it was and no idea how they were going to go together, but it worked. But let's talk about your pictures. And it's funny because we're talking about like sitting and observing and like sitting with the art and looking at it, but I just want to run through these really
Please.
fast because you selected many and I selected some, and I included this first because this is like my entire aesthetic rips this off because I love it so much. But I found this was like something you shot in Culver City on Tumblr and I found it. It was years ago, and I've always like held on to this, except when I lost it and had to refind it yesterday. But I do love this image, and it's so cool, and I love the mystery. And this is like something clicked with this image. Like I just love the mystery. I love black shadows. I love all of this, and even if I didn't know I was consciously seeking out this kind of light and look, I know I have been, and it's like I have appropriated it as my own.
Which is the goal, because like honestly, isn't that the point of sharing
Yeah,
imagery? Like I
yeah,
mean, I have a lot that I don't share just because I feel like no one's looking at anything now. But the thing that was so exciting about my California days were that you had the time and space away from the pressures of like New York or Chicago. And I remember like those lunch breaks I would take. You had to park in this parking garage, and I would just
you
pick the
say it
most.
in quotes like as if you were like sneaking off to do drugs.
It always felt like it
Lunch
was. Like,
breaks.
I mean, I've had to fight to just be who I am, and that sometimes meant like taking an hour for lunch, like going to
Yeah.
get a salad, and I mean, the joke there was the place I would go eat was called Lunch, and it was staffed by improv comedians, and it was amazing. I mean, you couldn't write that sitcom of that Culver City parking structure and this alleyway, and it was always kind of this rejuvenating experience because depending on where I'd park, I'd see different cars in the parking garage. And I remember it was like a Nova, I think, but like the color never came out in the picture the way that I saw it because it wasn't pure California golden sunshine. It was like muted, uh, bad film sunshine. But the
Yeah.
shadows from the parking garage, like the long shadows, it was just, like to me, it's like the best objects you want to create intrigue around. Even crappy objects, if you light it correctly, you draw people in, and that's like I found pictures of coffee cups I took in that same style. That was like my thing for that week, I guess, was like
Oh, that's
put an
amazing.
object on a table and then see what I can do with it. And that experimentation is so important because I think that proper lighting you were talking about is the easiest thing to sell and the easiest thing for people to identify. And I like the weirdness of an object that you can't see, or
Yeah.
in the automotive world, right? It's like the reveal photo. What's
Yeah.
the approved angle? And it's like, well, the approved angle is, what's that thing that you want people to think about when they're sitting in the car? Because
Yeah.
the joke to me
Yeah.
is always, you have the most beautiful car in the world, but you're sitting and driving it most of the time. It like in this garage here, when I get out of the car, and half the time I'm looking to make sure everything's like locked, but half the time it's just like I like looking at cars and I like
Yeah.
to see how the light hits it. And to me, that's like the best gift in the world is to be able to observe that.
Oh wait,
And
I wasn't sharing this, was I?
but we describe it now like you've built it
Oh
up,
my
so it's
goodness,
perfect.
that's embarrassing. So
No,
anyway,
no.
um, yeah, I was looking at it, enjoying it, but yeah. Anyway,
Well,
yes.
the thing like the California decay that I love, as you can see, is all the lights in the parking structure don't work except for this one, like the fluorescent light.
Yeah.
And I know, like my husband and I have very different views of like how this photo might work because he likes to like he would like take out the fluorescent light and would make it perfect,
Oh
which is
yeah.
cool. Like it's more like a painting. And I
Right.
like the weird rawness of none of those telephone lines are actually stable, and
Right.
the parking structure itself is probably not the most sound thing in the world. And
And the light
it's
is like
like
off kilter, like it's almost right above the car, but it's not quite. It's cool.
it's so cool,
Um,
and you're kind of like sitting there going, why did that person park there? Like of all the spaces in the garage, and this is a terrible garage. Like everything is, I would say more people got backed into in this garage than any other part of the Western world because it was just horribly designed.
were
But
you driving when you took this? Because it looks like you're like shooting over a fender or something.
oh no, I always did things. It would be either getting out of the car or I had just put the salad in the trunk. This is always my thing. Like I would
Okay.
use
Okay.
the car as like uh, either
A
part of
framing
the
device.
frame. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it, and it was weird that I would sit in the car. I remember editing the picture before I went back to the office because it's like, it's so satisfying, especially in California. Like this is a time when so many people wanted to move to other places. If you remember this, like roughly what 2012, 2013, and I felt really lucky for being able to live in California, but also I I had a couple friends, but I was never there. So for me, it's like I had to capture what I thought would be my short time there, like
Hmm.
every part of it. And the car culture is so wonderful, especially at the time in Culver City, because there wasn't anything around. I mean, it was still not really built up.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, I know it's weird to say like a desolate city, but you have the built world and it's empty. And that just, it's such a disconnect. But the long light, like the winter in California, which sadly with global warming we actually have that light here in Brooklyn now, but it's like super golden, very long, and especially as you get closer to the west side,
Yeah.
that filtered light that's like the color of a persimmon,
Hmm.
which even like I was just eating a persimmon yesterday and I can feel that light, like it's so dense.
Well, let's run through more of these. We're gonna go through
Yeah.
fast, and you just yell if I need to stop. Um, this
uh,
like this shows like how much fun you have with the camera, and just I mean, it's like a painting again. It's all very painterly. This one, amazing
This is the
colors.
same thing. The iPhone used to capture muted colors in such a better way than it does now. But like to
Yeah.
me, it's like that fading light, like that Rothko sky is always my favorite thing, where it's like that last glimpse of light. It's not
Well,
like your
and
typical. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and the limited dynamic range of the phone, especially then, was just like that was, that was it for me. That was the best.
It was the best because like you could make it was very honest, like
Yeah.
this wasn't fine art. It was an object that you saw. And I love like when I'm in an Uber or something, these are usually in an Uber, is like
Okay.
I love, and you can't like they made the iPhone, the camera, it's not fun anymore, but you could like game it to just do these long exposures just by like, moving your hands.
Right.
And I loved it because maybe people thought I was having a seizure, but like it was just I would
That's because they know
love.
you.
Right, they know that I'm nuts, but it's so much fun, and now you have to actually they change the way that the shutter functions. You actually, if you want to do this, you have to tap it and drag left in order to get multiple exposures. And
Oh,
I hate it because it used to be you just hold it down, and now it
yeah.
turns it into a video, which is like I don't want
Oh,
the video.
no.
Anyone can push a button. I want the movement, and like with the cliche of rain images in a city. I was like, I don't want just you know water on glass. I want to show how that refracts the light and how the city is like a blur of colors. Like I don't know, maybe it's just me because I've been sitting in this apartment so long, but like with every LED that we have, like whether it's on the air purifier or something, if you move away very quickly, like you can see most of the LEDs are multicolored ones, and you can see the RGB. And I love doing that because it kind of breaks down light into its essence, which is interesting. It's like the most
Absolutely.
interest. Yeah, like you get deeper into it.
All right. This one
All
I
right. So,
included. I thought this was like so much fun. Again, it was like I guess you were just like really forcing a lot of exposure. I don't know if it was dark or what, but
this is the parking garage in Santa Monica when I got this car, and I still think the F30. It's a beautiful car. But the thing that I loved is that uh, there's moments where this was my car because of the way that I'd capture it. I mean, how many black 330 uh, sport whatever things this was exist? They're all the same, but mine was the one that I captured in this way, and particularly under those horrible fluorescent lights. I would like to see, what can I do in this environment that if you just took this photo, it might be heavily photoshopped in a way to make it look like it could be in a catalog. But how do you elevate that? And like we all know, if you're a car person, you know what a F33 series looks like. But it becomes art when you abstract it and you turn it into something that might be how you'd want to see it in your head if you closed your eyes instead of what was there.
that is a brilliant way of describing this amazing capture. Um, I
Oh,
wish that
so
those modern SUVs weren't there, especially the Land Cruiser.
but
Um,
you know what's funny about this? So this parking lot now it's on 7th in Wilshire, and you park there now if you want to go to the Mendocino Farms, which I always used to go to. And I think at the time it was just a production company, and this Falcon was always there, and it was on like my photo walks. And Santa Monica like wasn't. It was just kind of urbanizing again, and so I was the only one that like walked around, and I had this little Sony RX. And I remember it was great because the battery lasted for like 2 days. So I would just take it with me and not develop the photos for like a week. And just the thing that was so amazing is in this parking lot, there was always like one interesting car and a Prius. But it was interesting to see how in this, I think it must have been was in April, but like the bushes were flowering, and it was
oh
great to
yeah,
see the colors kind of connect where like all the great street photographers that was like their thing. And
yeah,
there's a few like my husband follows that are really beautiful, but like in Amsterdam that you'll see the compositions be a collaboration between the people in it, what they're wearing, and the world around them, which I love. Like to me, that's what's so exciting about color is you see the repetition in like in an urban environment like this between the natural world and the built world.
yeah. I'm gonna run through these quickly. These are just like amazing street photography scenes. I included this one because I love, like, again, it just shows your, like, how you, like, you break all of the rules that like we're taught and we're told, and we're like, oh, this is a good photo, this is a not a good photo, and it's like you're like, no, like this is cool, like this looks good to me, this captures this moment in this place. And I love these perspectives, and I love the deep shadows.
Well,
So,
the
and I
rules are
love the way
like,
this guy's face is lit.
but isn't he haunting? I mean, I love this
Yeah,
photo, but I'm horrified that I
he
took
looks
this
like the guy
because
in the Too Many Cooks.
literally, I'm pretty sure like all the horror things that we've seen recently were inspired by like this guy wandering around New York. But the like, there's like when you're in that flow state where you feel like the compositions were made for you, like very Truman Show esque, like okay, cue the guy walking. It
Yeah,
feels like it's all there, and this RX, like the black and white mode, it just like crunched all the blacks, like crushed everything, and I kind
speaking
of
my lingo.
right. Well, but it like, when I hear real photographers talk about it, I go, well, yeah, but the dynamic range is not there. But the fact that this thing was so small and no one saw it as a camera was the gift,
Yeah,
because I will say I used to be much more brazen with my street photography than I am now. I don't know if it's with age or whatever, but I used to just not care what I was capturing. And then I think in Chicago, I was cursed by like some psychic when I was walking doing that. You took a picture of me. It's like I didn't. But it's like it was like, why does this offend you so much? Like if I took a picture of something, it's because it was beautiful, not because I'm like
only you would be
only
cursed
I
by a
know.
psychic. Okay, okay. Um, what motivates you to shoot black and white? Or I mean, you'll go through phases and eras. You know, you'll go through a time, and then you'll do black and white, and then you go back to color. Like, what is the reasoning for you?
It's like black and white to me is a way to capture the most purest of forms, and it's actually kind of a breath of fresh air for me when I don't want to actually take into account what's really going on. It's like the purest form of that moment is captured in black and white, and like the contrast in the light, especially in Southern California. I mean, it's just like it was meant to be there, right? Like there's some days that LA is very ugly, and other days you're like, I can't imagine being in any other place or anywhere where there's bright sunshine. And
Yeah,
what I love about even like this, this is it. I was staying at the Intercontinental in San Francisco when I'd go there a lot, and it was the most boring hotel. But it was amazing that you'd look out, and it was the right height to kind of capture the, for whatever reason, very bright light in the city. And these like light paintings, I love doing because depending on the camera you're using, it captures that long exposure in a different way. And like the texture to it, it just feels like a Nam Gabo sculpture, or the one who did the Inland Steel building in Chicago, Richard Lippold.
okay.
Like they're like wire sculptures, and I was obsessed with them. It's like this tension that you get typically in architecture, and I love that idea that you could capture it with a camera, because to me it's kind of the lazy way of painting. Like I like painting now, but this was just like all I have to do is figure out the rhythm, and then it's captured.
But that is such a unique way of looking at a camera and using it, and so many of these do look like paintings.
Thank you. Well, I mean, and that was, I still think this way too. I miss like maybe it's like a pandemic brain thing, but I used to just be so much better about capturing everything I saw. Like I would make it a point to take like 5 pictures a day. And when I was traveling a lot like this, it was always like the moments that no one was looking for, the ones
Yeah,
that people would just see as like interstitials. To me, those like, this is on Virgin America, and I was on a Virgin America plane like 8 times a month. But for me, it was like this whole series is like capturing the in-flight video and all the nuances of the airport. And it was such a short flight; it was like a 40-minute flight. But like it just, when you're out west, it feels like there's no one paying attention to you, and so it's easier to kind of blend in and kind of capture what's there.
yeah. Um,
Oh yeah, I mean,
MKZ. This is your reflections era. I mean, just the blues and everything in that is so nice,
well,
rich,
it's funny
and the
because not,
grain. It's like the grain from like the paint.
yes, which ineffectually is called orange peel, but to me it's like I view that as nothing. I mean, a car, as much as it is a sculpture, it isn't, right? It's a commercial object. And
Right.
so there is something really beautiful if you look at the texture of the actual sheet metal and paint. It's not a smooth surface. I mean, even as nutty as I am with my detailing, I'll never get my car to be, perfect. And the thing that I loved about this is it had a composite trunk lid. And so that remember that crazy spoiler that the MKZ had?
Yeah.
It was amazing at reflecting certain types of light. And if I had to do this
Yeah.
all over again, it would be to have like a reflector, but to really get that golden light in those weird shapes.
Hmm. Yeah, but if you had a reflector, then it wouldn't be the like run and gun, like seeing it as it is exists in the world.
That's
I
true. I
picked
mean,
this
like
one
even
out because I picked this one out because I
oh
love
yeah,
how it's just like out of focus, but it's like, no, this is a feeling. This is a mood. This is
it
a
was
vibe,
so
you would say.
simple. Yeah, and like the thing that cracked me up about this car is so many light signatures now are so complex, and they just nailed it with this one. It was so simple, the way that it was like
Yeah.
literally three lines, and I loved the way that it kind of fit into the urban landscape, because remember it had like that huge panoramic sunroof at a time when no one was doing it,
Hmm.
and it's like very typical Lincoln, right? Because I was just reading something that comes up every 3 months about the Lincoln Mark 7 and 8 having the first four-channel ABS, the first xenon headlamps, and it's like there's a lot of firsts that always happen with that brand. And this is trying to abstract those to show that it just kind of fits into the world that surrounds it.
Yeah. Oh, this is just so cool.
At the
It's
Henry
just,
Ford Museum.
oh, no way. I really have to go there.
Oh, it's amazing. And a friend got married there, and it was like in my head, I still think I was much younger because it felt like if I was 5 and you told me that that place existed, I wouldn't have believed it. I mean, it's there are so many great museums in Michigan. It's incredible.
Got to make a trip. Maybe next summer. More
All right,
reflection. This was at Pebble, right? That
I picked this because I loved when everyone else was talking and like hobnobbing, like you see here. I would be the one looking at the cars and not the things that were obvious because of their rarity, but because of how they were positioned in the field. And this shows to me like how I saw the event, which was everything had those crappy plastic chains, even though the cars were worth millions of dollars.
yeah.
Everyone was wearing, some form of a polo outfit, but the cars themselves are the stars. So the reflection of people in the car, I thought was like, this is the event. Like to
And the
me, this is Pebble
gloom.
Beach.
The gloom. I just
Yes.
realized that all of these people are in one reflection. I thought that this line was like the edge of the car or something, and that like these people were in reflection and these weren't. But this is very cool. They're all reflection. But yeah, the gloominess of this place for half the day.
Yes. And that we all go there willingly every year. And it's like you always get sunburned because you never remember that, in fact, sun goes through clouds.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
More
this
than
is,
that.
I mean,
So
and
nice.
this,
Just the
but this looks like
softness.
CGI. And I remember taking this and thinking, there's no way this is real. And I didn't really edit this. It was
Yeah,
just,
that's how it
it just,
looks. That's how things look there. It's dreamy.
yes.
This
Oh
was
yeah,
cool.
Lizzie. Remember
Yeah,
this? We
yeah.
we got permission to drive on the green and we had a drone, and that, I mean, that seems surreal.
The
Just
world's
looking at
first drone.
right, literally. Oh, that
uh,
was such a beautiful car, and
that
just
car
the
was
way that
amazing, and it was
it
it
was.
was it was a Continental Mark II. It was so European looking and gorgeous, and then it was painted this color, like inspired by Liz Taylor's eye color.
Right. It was just wild, and the fact that
Was it
that
for her?
color. Yes, this is her car,
Okay. Wow. Wow.
and just
That
it
was.
was. You remember, like in person, this didn't even capture how beautiful it was in person. Like it was
Oh no, it was
just.
amazing.
Oh,
And this is Detroit or Dearborn, rather.
Dearborn. And I think what's interesting too, I have like a couple that might have been in here about because like in my mind, it was Gordon Bunshaft that designed it. It's such a beautiful building to see on the outside, and I have some like further deeper crops. But like I remember being at that building in snowstorms and thunderstorms, and it was so much like this like jewel in the middle of a field that was so cool to see.
Yeah, we dropped off memory cards there.
We draw a lot of memory cards. This though,
That's so
so
funny.
for the reveal of this Mustang, which is still the current generation Mustang, the thing that was wild about that is that I got to take photos in like the design center, and that was like pinch me dream. And when the world revealed happened, I asked to be in LA and not in New York. And I remember part of the assignment was like, just take pictures that people wouldn't see normally. And all these people I didn't realize were news crews. And so I am in every picture of this car because I was the one that was like behind the scenes.
Oh, we
And
should be
I
looking at
thought,
that. We should be looking at those photos. That'd be good.
I wish we could find them because I had friends who were texting me. My phone was like off, but they're like, "You need to pull up your pants. We can see your butt crack." I was like, but
I
it
like
was
how everyone, like, no one is wearing any colors except red. Like,
it
that
was
is
like
such a cool
perfect.
thing. Yeah,
It's like the most amazing thing. Like to me, this is actually street photography, but it's actually a big,
yeah,
car event. And what I think is so cool is like it's the perspective of the car. We never like to think about what the object is seeing, especially when it's just momentarily surrounded by how many millions of people, you know?
yeah, yeah. That's a really, really good way to put it. Um, I love the
Oh,
tones of
Joshua
this
Tree.
set. Joshua Tree is a beautiful place, and this is a really cool tonality. It's like, again,
Well,
very
and
different. You just try so many different things and do different things, and it works a lot of the time.
and I love the fact that the light in Joshua Tree is really weird and very surreal and very like, ethereal and not of this planet. And to
Yeah,
me, this is kind of like the light that day wasn't very bright because it was like, I think in March. So it was a very weird angle of sunlight. And then these Joshua trees that just kind of grow against anything that we know to be the organic order. It's just kind of like, so it's really cool.
that is cool. We might. Okay, I
Oh
slipped
yeah.
this. I love the light. I love the light. But we gotta get to, and then this is the cover. Amazing. You explained a little bit of the process, but again, just like your way of looking and seeing things and capturing is so unique.
Thank you.
These are all so beautiful. Again, these are all paintings. It's crazy. Um,
Well, it's weird because like sometimes like I'll see it and I won't capture it. And the thing I'm always so jealous of is those like hyper realist painters or the people that are actual photographers, like that have like the real rigs and stuff. Because like in my mind, you know, a painting or an image making is always about like a dream that you might have that you want to realize. And
yeah,
I especially love like the surrealist type of work that couldn't exist, like all the, like a Dali or a Magritte, like it physically can't exist. And there's something really magical about that because it exists more in your head.
totally, totally. All right, and that brings us back. But so you sent me another thing. You're like, I have these inspiration photos. I want to talk about inspiration, and so let's talk about inspiration. And I've got I looked through the folder and I said, we're not gonna have time to go through all this. And then I saw there was some of mine. I was like, oh, I'm willing to hear this.
Well, the thing that I love to do is like I go back to I have this book that's like 20th century photography, and it's fascinating because you can see kind of where certain photographic movements kind of picked up from where painting went from the way that the world was captured to photography. So there was this brief period when the camera was coming up where a lot of artists said, well, there's already a way to capture now really what's going on. So I'm going to do something completely different. And you had that period like slightly before that when people were so tired of seeing the world as it was. So they created the world that they saw. And I loved kind of seeing how things became more abstract, more abstract, more abstract until like the 1860s when it just became emotions and like James McNeill Whistler and things that now we would define as modern painting are really now just painting, right? It's a way to capture either the way that you want it, the way you want the world to be, not the way that it is. And these to me are kind of the blending of the two. How do you make photography surreal? And I love a lot of these street photographers or these European artists that would come to the US and then find these moments that, you know, we might not have seen because they were visitors in the space. And I always like to consider myself a visitor in any place I am so that I'm not too comfortable. I can actually see the world around me, not the way that it is, but the way that it could be. And like this series to me too, it's like this surrealist way of what's possible. Like the
Mhm.
possibility angle is now kind of my thing because I feel a lot of brands aren't being true to themselves if they're not creating something that's pushing people to want more in their life. Like I love this photo, and it's an Austrian, Hungarian photographer that came to New York and saw the city in a way that was unique for an outsider. And this is everything about New York to me, which is It's a quiet moment in a public place. You're always in motion. There's the perspective of the photographer and the perspective of the viewer, but also the subject. There's like three things happening here, and it's like it's so beautiful, and like the look on the subject's face is just so fascinating. Like, why is she staring away? Knowing exactly where on the Manhattan Bridge this is, I can tell you she's
Yeah.
staring at Manhattan, like Upper Manhattan. But it's so cool because, like, in an hour I'll be going to get my haircut going over this bridge, and every time I act like this person. That it's so wonderful, and like I see it this way in motion blur, not in the way that it actually is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like there's this stillness and motion and everything all at once, which is very New York.
And well, so I mean, I love the way that, on film you could capture these jewel tones. And for me, this is kind of like the genesis of the way that I see the surrealist world around me. Like, this is clearly just a storefront, like a bar, probably, judging by the bottles. But seeing, this is Chicago because of the cab. B, you can, or maybe, is it New York? I mean, I don't know that it's Chicago. It could be. But I love the fact that you have so many different planes of focus here. And
Yeah.
the human subjects are implied. There's no one in it, but there's humanity in there. And I love the fact that you have to kind of stare at it for a second to figure out what's going on. And you get a snapshot of the world as it was in the 50s. I mean, you see everything, the way that the green tones in the cars kind of align, the yellow in the signs. Like, it's just, it kind of is like the world in harmony in this way.
The layering is incredible. Oh, that's
Oh
cool.
yeah,
Wow.
just to me again, like, there's, I think this is a Saul lighter. The New York is always captured in motion because everyone's always in motion, but the true gift is to the person who can stand by and watch everything happen. And this is, I think, in a side vent, like out of a side vent of a front seat of a car. And
Wow.
I love how they use the glass as a way to change the textures. And you have, like, again, like the red tones that just kind of like jump out of the frame
Well, it's so abstract and like the things that are in focus are not like the main object. You know what I mean?
at
Like the
all.
the the main focal point is out of focus.
And it's imperfect. Like, the way that it's imperfect to me is
Yeah.
so wonderful. And
Yeah.
it's how I view a place. Like this, when you're getting off a long flight, this is how you see like a European city coming from America the first night you're there. You're tired, you're seeing everything, but you're seeing nothing. It's all a blur, and it's
And the
shapes and
like the
colors.
chemical night lights and everything's like this, like your first impression of the place is this weird distorted color palette because of these can't remember the sodium lights.
Sodium halide, or
Yeah.
yeah, and it's really interesting to see how those are captured on film and then how you see it. And
Yeah.
now with all the tools that we have, you can make all these digital things feel very analog. But I love how even those analog things, the choices were so intentional, the way the film was designed, the way that it captured certain types of light. And I love, like, red to me, it's the color of passion. But it's also really interesting in certain cities where that becomes the through line is yellow or red, or if you're talking about certain ocean environments, the blue. Like, how do those things kind of follow that same path?
Yeah. Oh, that's
Oh,
amazing.
well, this is like, to me, if I had to like stare at one image for the rest of the time, it would be this one, because
Wow.
this has, compositionally, it's perfect. The color story is so vibrant, and the tension, like, even though it's the passenger in the cab holding onto the grab handle, it's done in such an effortless way, and it's like an older hand. Like, that hand has
Hmm.
seen things, and it's so interesting to see
Yeah.
those like the paint on that cab. If you see, like, on the rubber seal around the rear window, like the paints on that, like, these things are like slapped together. That's the way that people used to get around. It's so imperfect. And that
Yeah.
dashboard, even, that's like a metal dashboard. And it's just so incredible to me to see. You don't know who this is. There's no way you could probably figure out who the subject is. Yet this is an image that could live on forever because it's so relatable. It's something that you could see if you were a passenger in a car, or kind of like if you're thinking of great movies that you've seen that kind of live in that like a beautiful world crafted by a cinematographer, it's so uh, focused, but it's so meant for interpretation, which I love. Like you could put any story you wanted into this image.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Very
I'm
cool
a sucker
mirror.
for street mirrors because like
Yeah.
the garbage on the street is so interesting, and the idea that there's one, two, like five scenes playing out, even though this is probably propped up against, some
Yeah.
gas station, it
And
turned into
the
art.
crudiness of the mirror itself,
Absolutely. Oh,
more
and
out the
just
window.
out the window. Because, like, it's the frame by which we all see things, whether that's like in our houses or in the car or in a plane. I mean, to me, like, I think the most seminal event in my journey of seeing was when I got glasses for the first time because it was like a frame that I never knew I had. And it was actually cool because, like, I would hide behind the glasses, in one way. And then in another way, I would see it as an opportunity to actually be able to see clearly, but also to kind of see what other frames I might be able to find that aren't natural.
Hmm.
Oh, I mean, I think the great thing about photography is that you can coax a camera to do whatever you want. And a scene that might seem very boring, if you apply some sort of motion to it, becomes something so much deeper. And I've always loved scenes like this where you, again, like you could put an entire, you know, script around what's happening in this single frame. And there's so many questions that you have that you want answers to. And the
Yeah.
idea that it's not a motion blur per se, and it's not an accident, but it's almost like, did the photographer stumble upon this? Was it planned? Like, were
Right.
they
Yeah.
were they the one? Were they with this person and they just kind of fell behind? I love being able to like try to place where, who, what. Like, there's all these mysteries that kind of emerge.
You could pitch a movie based on like, okay, the moments after this scene, you know?
Exactly. Oh,
Oh, that's
this photographer, he very famously he came to the U.S. and he said he was going on a road trip to capture American life, and he got this camper van and just drove it around and tried to capture the U.S. as it was. And I think what's so amazing
when
about
was this?
in the 70s, I think. So this was, I think, from it's that park that's on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge that if you've been there recently, it's very developed now, but like 10 years ago even, it was just
Yeah,
a
yeah, I
military
know. Yeah,
base.
this looks different now. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
But it was similar to that till very recently. And then, I mean, Santa Monica, like the thing that, or maybe this was in Venice because the beach is lower, but the beach cities in California until very recently, there were times where you could walk around and be the only one there. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just, it was like the end of the world. Not the end of the world, but like the end of
Right.
the known. Like when you stare out in California, you're staring out at the Pacific, and there's always something really magical for like an East Coaster. Where here you look out and it's like, oh, it's the Atlantic, whatever, you know. But the Pacific is so big and mysterious.
And the water's not
Um,
gray.
right, right. Oh, I mean, public transit. I mean, the thing I found, I miss taking the subway, even though I'm scared of the subway being stuck underground. But the people existing and capturing that, like those slice of life moments,
Yeah.
just
And again, going back to like earlier, I love the mystery of like we don't know who these people are. We can't see them, but they are like going about. I just love. It's more interesting to me that you can't see any details at all about them.
no, and you make the story, and the color story tells you a lot too. It like these street images where humans are so fascinating, right? We never like to think, well, now of course with how many cameras we'll have, we're all being watched, but it's like you're not being viewed in this way. Like Vivian Meyer, I mean, so this is what's so interesting, right? So this is in the front of the New York Public Library, and Vivian Mayer, was a nanny in Chicago, and she just had this eye that was like incredible, and the things that she chose to capture, like the mood here, is just, I mean, it's breathtaking, right? Like you look at this and you see that it's taken from either a cab or a bus, and just there's so much going on, but that subject, like there is something deep going on there. It's just so dignified and just the frame is so beautiful, right? Because it breaks the rules. Like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
in the lower third kind of, but not really. It's more like there's a depth to it that makes you feel like, you want to reach out and be a part of that moment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, because it's like there's moments that feel very posed and very like planned, and then there's others that just exist. And I think that's what now I feel is just missing from the world is we don't have those in between moments like this where you're taking a minute to contemplate the universe. There's kind of like a freedom to this moment that seems like so long ago. And like I love this because it is in my mind the closest thing that we'll have in contemporary terms to like a painting that captures the way that a village or a family was. This is so alive, and the sculpture of the car contrasted
Yeah.
with the age of the kids and like the forms of the car. It's just like it's
Yeah.
incredible to me. Like you don't get that baroque. Like you couldn't imagine. Can you imagine now like a picture like this in like a Rav 4? Like no one would
Right.
remember that, and it
The
wouldn't
kid
have
would have
the
to be 12 years old to get over the beat pill, like over the belt line, and then there'd be like a
right,
giant ugly
right,
pillar.
right, and
Yeah.
just the casual nature of this too. Like there's a tactility to this image that I love. Like in the sweaters, like I mean, it's so phenomenal to me. Where an image that was probably, let's say, what in the 50s, early 50s, like you look at this now, and there's like this power to it that is
Yeah.
hard to find in a contemporary photo.
Well, and the textures are amazing. Like the gloss, like the car looks so
Oh
clean, and their
yeah,
sweater is so like, pilled, I
pilled
guess.
and warm, like there's life. It's like life happening there. And but
Yeah,
the casual nature, like this was a moment, and like the girl
absolutely.
posing like that. I mean, it's so like you feel it. I love that. Oh yeah, well,
And
I
that's
mean,
White
Gary
Sands.
Weinrund, White
Is
Sands,
that?
but it's like, I mean, this is the original influencer picture. This is where when people would go out and they would just go discover, what was on the planet. This was like an alien landscape going to White Sands. This is when those tin structures that are now, Instabate were built. And
How do
I,
you
I,
really feel about Instagram?
I mean, I miss it because like, remember when we used to like find cool things
Yeah.
and just like actually discover not the same 5 pictures of Volvo C40s that I find. Oh, go back, go back.
Okay.
So the, the thing that I like to about these sorts of street images is can you imagine a universe where there's 4 people staring to figure out a problem that they would take this long to figure out, and B, it's like as we move into this universe of electromobility and whatever, it's like it's so manual. Like what's wrong? I don't know, maybe hit it, because like we're staring probably at like a snake pit of things, and it's like it's so innocent, like, oh, that's great, you have the time to kind of stand here and stare at this engine bay, that's cool.
I just love like the hand drawn lettering everywhere. Like it's pretty
Oh,
amazing.
I mean, everything now, like that Quaker State motor oil, like the beautiful geometries and the hand drawn signs in the
That
background, like
R, yeah,
gin.
that bottom R on the Quaker State, like on the motor oil, is giving me life.
Oh, it's beautiful, and like you realize that all that metal and stuff is like a lot of it. When you think about the organic curves that were there, it's just like there's so much uh, there's so much energy to them. There's so much life in each of the forms. And like
Imagine
this
if they
next
were
one,
okay.
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna imagine if they were standing around a current Rav 4.
Right, staring at a scan
They
tool.
examining like where does this line go? I don't know. It
Right,
just ends
it
in
just
this other
ends.
line. Yeah.
This I love because it's like 70s or late 70s, like early 80s LA, and there is this like the one little bit of humanity that you can see and the rest is hidden. And I love the drama of like this feels like a screenshot from The Americans, right?
Yeah,
Like
the
you picture this could
wind.
be the wind, but like the the perfect capture of don't do this, and then here's this person kind of living in this sort of freeing world trapped by the grid and the signs. Like it's such a cool juxtaposition.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
that's
I
cool.
mean,
That's like this is like you. This is this is
well,
like you if you were shooting 1940s gangsters in
the
zoot
weirdest thing
suits.
is I started doing this kind of stuff. I saw this picture at the SF MoMA, that trip where I did all this stuff with in the Intercontinental, and I remember like going through this exhibit going, this feels like something I would take. This is so weird. Like, I don't know this person. Like,
Wow.
and then I think he might have passed away like around when I was born. It's one of those things where you're like, did I get some of this dude's spirit? Like, what am I supposed to
Yeah.
do with this? Because like, there's, I don't know if you like, there's a way that, like my uncle was a dentist, but an artist. And he was, I wasn't super close with him, but he would send me some of the art that he was making. And I would see like when he would draw some forms, it's the way that I would. So that's like a genetic thing of like, when
Wow.
I'm making shapes, like my body this is the way that it wants to do it. And so it's
That's sick.
interesting to see, the idea of the way we move and see the world is informed by so many things, like a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture, but you have to kind of be around a lot of art and a lot of inspiration to bring that out.
Yeah. And we're back at the start. We should probably wrap this up, but this was really amazing. And like, what else do you have to say about inspiration? Just the nature of it. We just looked through these amazing photos, and you like just the fact that you're finding them in places and galleries and arts, and you're in books and studying them. Like that is so refreshing, and that's something we can all do, and not just refresh Instagram and look at the same like archetypical photos. You know?
I mean, but you're talking to the person who just does that too. I mean, you have to
Right.
really
Yeah.
push
I mean, saying
yourself.
I'm inspired by you.
Yeah.
Like this is a lesson that you are bestowing upon us.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, like, I am in the other background I have for the computer, I always have an Edward Hopper because to me, it's like the way that Edward Hopper created these worlds that didn't exist is always inspiring to see what you could do. And these characters that now, like, I have Nighthawks up here, and it's, Nighthawks is something that is often seen as like a parody or is often referred to in contemporary history. But if you actually look at the detail that's there, I mean, there's a universe that he created in his head that, of course, it should exist because it's so relatable. But I will say, there's inspiration, but then there's like, what do you do with it? And the
Right.
collaboration thing, like I always go back to, I'm always, it, I feel the most fulfilled when I work with people I can truly collaborate well with, and to me, there's like a trust there.
Yeah.
And the thing that I find just so amazing, and what was so great from like those Lincoln days or like at Hearst, was like there were certain people that they trusted implicitly that the artists would get the job done in a way that would help further advance, the brand or the message or whatever. But it was for me, it's like I work and I love working with people that I trust have that same vision and can figure out a way to get it done because there's no perfect way to do that. But that trust is so key in everything. And I think there's so few things now in commercial art that you can feel there's that trust between the commissioner and the person doing it. And there's always a lot of like, it's that the syndrome where a CEO says, I know how to do everything. Like, remember when United Airlines rebranded? And at the time, the CEO was like, I made the logo. And it's like, you took two things and
Oh yeah, they took the worst part of the United logo and the worst part of the Continental logo and slammed them together.
right. It's like, why would you do that? The whole point of being at that level is that you delegate to people that do things the best, that go deep and understand where things fit. And so that level of trust is so important because I think that's, you know, is a society what we could all learn is that if you trust in someone to get the thing done, it will be get done in a way that is kind of right for the moment. And there's always an opportunity to do more and to evolve. And
Yeah.
nothing's final. Like to me, that's always the best thing about, the digital world is that you can keep iterating, but there's also this time when it's like, when and how often should you do that? Because I'm
Right.
a big believer in the like, you got to take a minute to let it sink in. And the
Yeah.
speed at which so much is being made now is like humans can't absorb it. So like as brands, people should realize, you need time to have it sink in so that you savor something to want more of it. Or else it's
Yeah.
just kind of like, like it's the idea that I've watched every show possible that I want to watch. So now I'm just rewatching Seinfeld because I can't
And
possibly
sending
absorb
sending screenshots.
screenshot. Yeah, right. I mean, that's the best part about like, seeing things in a remastered way. How many times have you seen episodes of Seinfeld? It's like, how many times can I watch The Sopranos and find something new? Like great works of art because they're the right collection of people making things at the right time are worthy of that rewatching and reinterpretation. And I think that's like truly where the best things connect is like it has to be a true collaboration. Like it can't be like one person in a dictatorial fashion saying this is the way. It's like there isn't a way. It's like you need to guide people there. Like, you know, we were talking about our best friends at Apple. It's like, yeah, the Steve Jobs era led to a lot of great products and things happening. But now it's kind of like you can tell it's like 400 people doing different things. Like nothing connects. And the
Yeah.
beauty is when things just work, when there's a connection there. So there has to be a level of trust in order to have those things function. And with art, it's like if you're I would always say like my thing I always tell people is you have to have your personal passion projects and your commercial ones because the personal ones that's actually art, right? That's there are gajillion definitions of art, but true art is art things that are made because you wanted to make them, like you made the choices if they're yours. And I'm a firm believer in like some parameters and clear direction make for a better process when you're making commercial art. Like you want to know what the bounds are, but at the same time, it's not yours, right? Like that's the brand's.
Yeah.
And I think sadly we're away from that era where like the artist truly defines the outputs because the brand is the one in charge. But I would love to see it go back to a place where it meets in the middle because then there's so much more personality there and there's so many more things we haven't seen or haven't found ways to connect on visually. And I'd love to see that like come into the NFT world, for instance. You know, like there's that aesthetic that exists, but I wish there was like that meeting of the middle where it's kind of like, you know, what made Hopper see the way that he saw it was the environment he grew up in. And it's great that there's that NFT aesthetic, but how can that evolve? And how does that
Hmm.
evolve into like things that are more mood based instead of character based? Because like
Yeah.
if the NFT things were about, I mean, obviously I get the technology, but like the aesthetic, it's like if
I
can you
don't. I think it's
imagine?
all really stupid.
I get it, but like, can you imagine if it was like Rothko esque things that were being made, like literally the most dreamy, wonderful combinations of colors, and it was more ethereal?
Hmm.
I mean,
But
I
that could
believe
just
me.
exist. That could just exist without it being like a like speculation scam. That could
I
just exist as
know.
art.
I mean,
We're
I
getting off
think
the rails here. We're getting off
I
the
no, but
rails.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Um, I think we should call this an ep because
Okay.
not because you mentioned the bad word, but because it's been an hour 20 and it's been really amazing, and your insights into the artwork and inspiration and collaboration have been amazing. Some of the people commented. Doug Saunders said hello, and he said that you need to do car
Hello.
stuff in the city. Will
Right.
Pierce was amazed by psychic curses and collaborations and the picnic shelters being the same at White Sands. Chris Wynn says hello. Sean Prinz says some of the work was gorgeous.
Oh, cool.
Thank you so much, Maury, for doing this. I think this was like really insightful for people, and I'm so glad we got to talk and look at this. And you know, you're one of the most talented, creative people I know. And whenever you ask me for my creative insights, I'm like, or like, does this font look right? I'm like, I don't know what I did right in life for you to be asking for my feedback. So,
Oh,
thank
please.
you.
I mean, I'm honored because you are so
All
incredibly
right. Well,
creative,
we don't.
and
You're the one on
I
trial here. You don't need to say.
well, it's true. Like I like making sure that I stay connected to the people that inspire me because it's like those are the things that make us all stronger. And like you know, sit in Illustrator. Like seriously, having you review typography, I'm like, okay, I have to sit there and make sure that it's perfect.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, everyone that watched and commented, and we will see you next time. So, bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.